So I'm very happy to have you all here. I'm very more happy even to have our panelists here. And we will be having a conversation about LGBTQIA people, selves in the craft brewing industry. So I'm going to start by asking our panelists to each introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Sheila Garcia, and I am the current Education and Events Manager for the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. We are the nonprofit trade organization that represents the small and independent craft brewers of this lovely large state of Texas. I joined the guild as a staff member a year ago. Previous to that, I have worked at 3 breweries in the Austin community and also served on the board of the guild before joining the staff. So happy to be here today.
My name is Ross. I am owner and manager of Brewing out in Dripping Springs. We have a focus on wild crafting and nature focused, connecting to nature and people. I've been in the brewing industry for about 10 years, most of that time at Relail, and I was supply chain manager, so kind of been on the office side of things, but I started out as a home brewer, so yeah, I know my way around the brew house.
Yay! Hi, I'm Melissa Irwin, and I've been in the industry for about 5 years now. I was a brewer and assistant production manager, and then production manager at Jester King Brewery up until about 7 months ago, and then I've been at Austin Beer Works as a brewer since this past June.
Welcome to you all. You can hang on to that, Mel.
I just thought about we should probably say our pronouns.
Thank you so much. I'm the worst LGBT studies teacher ever. Please, my name is Alex. My pronouns are she and hers.
My name's Sheila, and my pronouns are she and her.
Ross and he, him.
Mel and she, her.
Thank you guys for doing that. Thank you very much, Sheila. So I see a lot of people in the audience who have good ideas and know things, so including current students who I'm going to call on. No, I'm just kidding. But, I would love to have you guys participate, so think about questions that you all have for our panelists. But we'll get started with some general information. So the first thing I wanted to know, you guys told us where you worked, but if you could tell us how you got involved in the craft brewing industry, I'd love to hear that.
Started in college, got a little Mr. Beer kit and brewed a stout. And stouts are easy because you like to hide a lot in there. And so, well, depending on who you ask. But I fell immediately in love. I came home with it. I got my brother and my dad involved. And then over the course of our lives, we got the opportunity. My family owns the land at Beerbird. My dad is the one that's financing the whole project. My brother got the brewery started. I now took it over. So it's truly I brought brewing into my family. They took it away, and now I get to kind of take that mantle on now. So it has been so much fun in a family effort.
I got into brewing, or I just got into beer. When I was 21.
21.
When I was 21. Actually, really, when I was 21. It started out drinking imports. I went on a college trip to Mexico. It wasn't spring break, but it wasn't spring break. It wasn't Cosmo. It was an archaeological thing. And I had Negro Modelo for the first time. It's oh, this isn't yellow beer, which is hilarious because now I specialize in making yellow beer. But over years, it started with imports, and then the craft scene started taking off. And then I was at a point in my life where I had kind of burned out on my previous career and was looking for something that I was passionate about. And I had done a little bit of side work in the wine in a winery, and was I don't really feel that. I like wine, but I'm not that passionate. What I really love, and I was I like beer, and so from that point, I just pounded pavement until I ended up starting as a bartender at Jester King, and then worked my way into production and worked my way from there.
So I come from the front of house side of craft beer. I worked in radio for 10 years, promotions, ran street teams, spinning prize bills, popping up tents, running giveaways on air, and essentially landed at a place where I had the opportunity to fall in love with craft beer as a small business. I just knew I was done with working for corporations and wanted to be able to be a part of a brand and help grow it and see that growth and be a part of a community. And so I happened to be at a brewery with friends that worked at a brewery when I was looking for a job, and it's like, oh, craft beer, that's a small business. And so I landed at Hops and Grain and started as a social media and events manager, and then went through running sales teams and distribution and working with the production, and have been lucky enough to follow that dream of working in craft beer while doing the hospitality side of things.
I love it. Excellent. I'm gonna mix things up and ask you guys what your favorite beer is. I'm doing our questions out of order. I'm being a little wild, and then we'll go back to some deeper questions. But right now, what's your favorite beer that you're drinking?
Well, my favorite go-to beer style is pale ale. I love hops, but I also like to be able to drink multiple beers and still be able to have conscious conversation. But as a guild staffer at the Texas Craft Brewers Guild, representing all of the small and independent craft breweries of the state, my favorite beer is the one that I'm drinking. So right now it is St. Elmo West's, their West Coast IPA.
Excellent.
I mean, kind of a similar answer. When you're in the industry long enough, it's hard to separate the technical from the passion. And so there's always something exciting to explore in your glass, even if it's not the pinnacle of beer achievement. I mean, I was in Portland and I literally cried over a pale ale recently because it was just such a marvelous pale ale. I was like, oh God. But my favorite, I go to Vacancy a lot. I go to Central Machine Works a lot. Going to Vista, going to Praetorian Flamingo Bombs.
Yeah.
The bomb. So like, I love it. I just love beer. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up like getting tiered up over beer. The first and only time I've actually gotten to go to CBC, which is basically the craft brewers conference. I was with my boss then at the time, and it was we were really hungover, and we had brought back like multiple 4-packs from Bierstadt in Denver. CBC was in Denver. And that next morning I woke up and I was like, I have to go to the rest of this seminar, so I'm gonna have to do some hair of the dog. And I'm sitting on our balcony of the Airbnb, and I cracked open a slow pour pills in a can, which was kind of a travesty, but hey, you know. And I did that, so he walks out, and he's like, are you okay? And I was getting teared up. And I was like, this is my favorite beer. You want that me? It's gonna be a brewer. And he was like, that's huge. So if you ask what my favorite beer in general, it's Bierstadt in Denver, slow pour pills. But as far as like my favorite beer that I drink at Austin Beer Works is, I drink the most small tap because it's 3%. And as she says, you want to be able to carry on a conversation. Flavor Country is my general go-to, though right now we have Inscrutable Stout. That's really good. My favorite Jester King beer is Nocturne Chrysalis, which is a barrel-aged sour on Marion berries, and I'm very proud of the fact that for like 3 years in a row, I got to be the person building the blend that went into that. And anytime you get a chance to try that out, I highly recommend.
Is that one of the ones that they release like a special day? I've been out to Jester King on some days where they release, like, today is the day that this gets released for the season, and it's so exciting. Is that one of those?
Yeah, I tried to get them to release it on my birthday one year, and they were down for it, but then they accidentally ordered the wrong labels. So they showed up, and I was like, this is not that. And they're like, oh no, and we couldn't get the labels in time. So we went ahead and did like a little, like, vertical. We had a little party for my birthday, but we didn't get to release the beer for I think another 2 weeks after that. It tends to get overshadowed by Atrial Brugicide, which is what they're most known for, which is raspberries. I personally am not a raspberry fan, and if you've ever had to dive into like 91 55-gallon barrels full of raspberries before, you get sick of raspberries.
That's really funny. Okay, so my more serious question is about the community and the craft brewing industry. I'm curious if there are a lot of LGBT people in the industry. Is there kind of a community? And if not, sort of how are you guys trying to build one?
So I joined the craft beer industry in early June 2015. And I was working at Hops and Grain, and a few weeks later, the law passed giving same-sex partners the right to marry in the United States. And I'm getting teared up because it was quite a moment to walk into the brewery after my mom had already texted me being super excited. I've been out since I was 19, but I walked into the brewery and my fellow coworkers were just as excited. And I'm pretty sure I was the only LGBTQ person, so I'm having just a ton of allies being super supportive. So I just like to share that moment because it's a happy memory. I know that Ross has a lot to share on this as well, and I'm excited to hear about it. I think, you know, the benefit of craft beer is that it truly is built around community. But LGBT members in Texas and, you know, in the United States, we have to continue to show ourselves, to be present, and I just very much value the allies that I previously mentioned and those that we continue to meet. But I'm excited to hear Ross's sharing of story here.
So I only came out, or I found queerness relatively recently. And so building community, finding community has been huge for me. It has been one of the most personally gratifying things that has ever happened to me is to find this within myself and to see it in other people and to be able to like participate in that way. So building and finding community has just been huge for me. I don't know that there's like a connected cohort of queer folks talking to each other, establishing. I'm trying to explore what that looks like with a friend, and I think that there could be a real opportunity, especially now and especially going forward. But carefully, I mean, being out is going to be a weird place to be, whether established in your identity or finding it like me. It's going to be difficult. So I guess I had like a 3-step thing that I was like, number one, getting involved, finding out who your people are, whether they're in the industry or not, but like knowing your community's needs and not presuming those needs. There's a lot of allyship that relies on like, I know what I think you need, so I'm going to do that. Or you follow a standard, or like, we're going to do a collaboration. And that's going to happen in this time, in this place, and that's going to be kind of where it sits. So like knowing your community, getting involved, being involved outside of brewing, incorporating those needs and bringing them back to your leadership, but then also being mindful of your growth path. Dream big, and then ebb and flow with your successes and failures as a business you navigate that. But like, I'm in a unique position because I'm actually the leader of my business. And so I'm stepping in, whereas previously I didn't have that leadership opportunity. I could suggest and recommend, but that's kind of where I find myself now. Is now that I have leadership opportunities, how do I engage with a community that, to my knowledge, doesn't necessarily exist? And working with you all is probably going to be part of that. So I'm happy to at least start here.
Yeah.
I would say I just somehow stumbled into working in 2 consecutive places where I was not the first and only queer person on staff. Not that there was a whole lot at either place, but I was not the only one. When I first moved down to Austin, I honestly think, Sheila, you might have been the first or second queer person that I met in the industry here. And that was, I don't even know how many years ago. So in that regard, like, I haven't had to just exist as an island, but I definitely know that beyond Austin, and even within Austin, like, we don't all look like the typical brewery worker. When I worked at Jester King, we had a very diverse crew of people, and brewers would come from other parts of the country. Other cosmetologists, we'd have brewers come from Denver, come from San Diego, come from other places, and they would be like, y'all don't really look normal. And yeah, like, weird, why would you point that out? And I used to have a bunch of statistics I could rattle off about, you know, the facts of like how our representation is, but to be honest, I can't access them right now, sorry.
Did you want to go?
I'll add more, you go ahead.
Okay, you reminded me that like brewing is a weird industry because you think it's a refuge for people who are creative and expressive and want to do something a little alternative to society, but you do still find it is a very 30s male with a beard, white misogynistic environment. And that applies to a lot of things, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was the intersectionality of queerness. You cannot support queerness without understanding that that is everybody in every industry, not just within your brewery, but your patrons. You are creating an environment where you need to be mindful of not just what you think people need, but that there will be a diversity of people, specifically queer intersectional identities, coming into your place of business, and that's going to have to hold a lot of space in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, my thought ties to that, in just thinking about a few breweries that I walk into and immediately see rainbow flags or trans flags. It's just, I work in the craft beer industry. I'm lucky enough to know a lot of people at various breweries, but I also have a good amount of queer friends, and taking them to breweries where you immediately walk in and feel safe. Black Star unfortunately recently closed a weekend ago, but they have rainbow flags, they had rainbow beer. Like, it was very much like, I know I feel welcome here and therefore feel safe. And so yeah, just even today, like as the guild, we were delivering 6 packs of beer, 100 cases of beer went out to your legislators in the Capitol today. But every office, or not every office, the offices that I walked into that had rainbow flags, trans flags, I just immediately felt a little bit more safe and welcome, and a little bit more able to speak more openly and whatnot. So just tying back into what Ross just said, like as a business, as a place that is inviting people in, having people that look like us behind the bar, behind the brewery, and also just whatever signaling that is, that we are welcome.
Yeah, those are really good points. Thank you all. I wanted to ask about, I was curious how much of the dude bro-ness there was in the craft beer industry, and I think you guys both touched on that. I've definitely seen it, right? That's definitely one of the stereotypes I have. Like, one of my visions of the craft beer industry is that it's filled with artistic and creative people, Ross, like you were saying. And then my other stereotype in my head is that it's filled with 35-year-old dude bros who are gonna tell me exactly what I should like about what kind of beer and judge my choices, right? So, I don't know, are either of those stereotypes true or both a little true? What is it like from your vision?
Yes, and again, working for the Guild, being the education events manager, working with an amazing group of colleagues, we host conferences throughout the year. We have our annual meeting coming up, and then our roundup, which happens in the summer, and those are educational based, and we have the ability to make sure that we're including diverse speakers at those events, diverse topics. And so I think that just ties back into having a space, having a welcoming space, but creating topics that hopefully can, we know that there are people that have unfortunately opposite viewpoints of who we are, but if we can just slowly open those gates and turn it from just a dude bro type of industry, which, I do feel like I'm Austin based, we're all Austin based here. I think, we love this bubble that we live in, but the more we get out around the state, I think that it is changing, and part of that is being present and being visible.
Yeah, I think you saw that a lot 5 or 6 years ago with the Morning Wood incident. I don't know how much y'all know about that, but there's this kind of origination of where craft brewing was, I guess, in the 90s and early 2000s, where it's a bunch of guys making a lot of dick puns. I mean, puns and dick jokes were like, you had to fight not to call a beer something that was in that arena. And so, as the industry matures and we become a more inclusive place, I think you're fighting that legacy, and you saw it too in the what was Rat Magnet's Me Too resurgence in that arena.
Yeah.
Brave Noise.
Brave
Yeah,
Noise,
Brave Noise.
Bailey.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the exact hashtag. It was an expansion on Me Too.
Yeah. So there are incidents in my career, in the 10 years that I've been brewing, where I've seen this culture of dude bro really try and reassert itself. And I think that I keeping an eye on that, again, speaking to your leadership, knowing where it's coming from, navigating around it and away from it, and trying to encourage inclusive dialogue and naming and convention, even expanding your beer styles, just not trying to play to the lowest common denominator and saying, what are people drinking, what's exciting, push. Innovation and strategic growth requires you to push boundaries. And that often, in any business, is going to buck against your highest sales trends. And so there are going to be moments where you get to challenge yourself as a company, as a brewery, and as a brewer, to really find a place to speak up, both in the conventional marketing, but then also in the style selection, to combat Dubro, because it's going to keep going there.
Yeah.
And lastly, I'm so sorry, do you want to take over for a second?
No, keep going.
Brewing is a very capital-intensive industry, especially when you build out something that's going to cost you $2 to $5 million at least, depending on how you're going to do it. If you're going to build out a brewery, you're going to need a lot of money. And in Texas, that means you're going to get investors who have certain opinions about who they want as bartenders, what they want the bathrooms to be. Like, getting inclusive bathrooms was an issue and is now definitely going to be an issue on new build-outs. And so, those were actual fights we had with people that were funding our brewery who knew and understood the fight, but still didn't understand why we wanted certain people on staff and facility, like the ADA compliance that we have throughout the entirety of beer brewing. Having that awareness to say there will be no steps or surfaces you can get from the front of the building all the way to the back of the building without impeding your traffic flow. So oh boy, I covered a lot there.
That's good.
So I think I'll stop there because my brain just farted out.
So one of my favorite activities is when I have a man try to mansplain to me a beer that I made. Yes, I love that moment when I get to be like, I wrote that recipe, or I brewed that, or I helped brew that day. Brings me a lot of joy.
I love that, that's great. Well, I do have other questions, but I'd love to hear what the audience has been thinking, if that's okay with you guys. What kind of questions do you guys have that you would like to ask, if you have any? And I will bring you the mic if you do have some. Anybody?
I'll ask a question.
Yeah, please. Do you need a mic? Would you like a mic?
Hello. Talking about styles, I'm just curious. What do you think would be a style that could sort of bridge that gap into more inclusivity? And do you think that there are existing styles that are already commercially successful that could maybe bridge that gap and sort of create a nexus that we're both commercially successful and inclusive? And I was just hoping maybe you could expand on that in general. Do styles create inclusivity in themselves?
Super interesting. Yeah, go for it. Good question, thank you.
I guess it goes to me since I said
Yeah,
that.
you said that.
Oh boy, put me on the spot. Interestingly, you had a question that I think ties into this. You asked about the bar scene and how queer inclusive spaces have typically been alcohol-intensive spaces in terms of gay bars and things like that. In my own experience, when I really started first coming out, it was Fourth, the Iron Bear, places like that, where I started to actually exist in spaces where it was predominantly queer. I loved that, but craft beer was really only present, and I'm gonna maybe get into a space where we're gonna be losing some folks, but like kink and leather bars, where you can have like a body type that's not in that twinky, hairless, muscled kind of situation. And so going into spaces where alternative body types are welcomed, you do see people drinking beer a lot more frequently. So when I say style inclusivity, it's really just having an eye towards demographics that may be drinking differently. Maybe also you have a lot of people battling addiction in queer communities. So having simply non-alcoholic options is huge when you want to have people who are dealing with other types of issues in their life. Or they may drink regularly, but they need an option to not drink when in crisis, which does happen. So I would say just what's on the top of my mind, low ABV NA options, and then a really wild and wacky glitter beer is never going to
Are there, like, all the NA options, the non-alcoholic beer options I know are like O'Doul's and, I don't know, like Heineken, right? They're not craft beers. Are there NA from craft beers? That could be my own ignorance, because.
Do you want to take that?
So it's starting to expand more. There's starting to be more options. There are some complications as far as being able to effectively produce a non-alcoholic beer on a smaller scale. There's just some technical things that make it kind of difficult in terms of, I'm not going to get into like the weeds of explaining all of these things like, oh, you know, the alcohol keeps prospects of infection and stuff down. But you know, being able to do things like even just hop water is, you know, something that is really, you know, any brewery anywhere has hops. You have water, you have carbonation, you have hop water. With, you know, obviously this really isn't going to necessarily appeal to everyone or be appropriate for everyone, but for at least right now in the state of Texas, you can make THC-based seltzers. Which is another option. And then even if you have like the licensing tier where you're not really supposed to have guest beers from other places, you are still allowed to carry non-alcoholic beers. There are some smaller brands like Athletic and that can be are carried in places. Just to know also though, most of those non-alcoholic beers are probably going to have a teeny tiny, like 0.05%, 0.5% still in them. So if you were someone who cannot have alcohol at all, that might not be for you. As far as like inclusive styles, I mean, I think Sheila brought up like a nice pale ale is something that, you know, when I want to say, used to come up a lot at Jester King when I was still working front of house where, you know, you have a guy and his lady friend come up and he'll say something like, I don't know, like what's a girly beer? And I loved having like one of the seemed like the most dude bro bartenders out there. He really wasn't. He would just deadpan them and go like, what's that? What do you mean? And he'd be like, you know, like, you know, what's a, you know, like a girly, like a, I don't know what you mean. What he was usually meaning was like, what are people walking around that's pink right now? Which we would have a lot of pink beers. But, so I don't want to sit there and say like, you know, don't do your triple IPAs, hate for hazy bros, because guess what? I like those beers sometimes. But having things, you know, give yourself like a few different variety and options. You know, don't lean too hard onto one style, because I can tell you, we were in a hard time in the industry. You know, people just are not drinking. They're not drinking beer as much. They're not drinking, period. Don't limit yourself to saying like, we are going to live and die by this certain style, because I watched that kill breweries. I watched that almost kill breweries I worked at. Have yourself a variety of options, but make sure you don't overexpand. Make sure everything you do, you can do well. If you can do 5, 6 different beers really, real well, do 5 or 6 different beers really, really well. Get yourself a lager. Have yourself a big hazy beer. Keep yourself something dark on stout, because you're going to have customers that are going to come in and be like, I just want something, like, do you have an amber beer? Do you have an amber ale? Have an amber ale, or something like it. But don't just don't hang your hat on any one thing, but also don't overexpand.
And just to add on to that and bring in the hospitality hat, you know, you brew the beer, but then you have people working in the front of the house that are selling the beer, talking to your patrons. So don't forget to train them properly in the way of don't speculate, don't assume. Someone walks up to you, read what they're telling you. You know, you have somebody walk up and they're like, immediately knowing what they want, and you know, if you have time and there's not a line, it's like, oh, awesome, you love that, you like Citra and Mosaic hops, that's what's in there, like, go that way. Or it's someone and they're just looking like a deer in headlights, it's like, oh, hey, is this your first time in here? Like, read that personality that's stepping up to there, and train your staff to do that. And the biggest thing is, again, don't assume, don't speculate, and that is going to take your team and your beer a long way.
Those are good answers, thank you. Any other questions from the audience, or should I ask another one? You got any? Jesselyn, questions? All right. Okay, so my other question for you guys is about queer spaces. You were talking a little bit about the Iron Bear, which I love that place. I'm curious, just honestly, what your favorite queer spaces are in Austin, right now or historically, and if there's things that you can generalize from that you feel like makes things inclusive. And Ross, you've already been talking about that to some degree, but like, what are your favorite queer spaces? I'm gonna start with mine, because I'm greedy and want to tell you guys. I really love Cheer Up Charlie's, right? And I will tell you, here's why I love it. I love it because they do tons of benefits. They have gender neutral bathrooms, right? Those are gender neutral. Trying to think, like, was there ever a sign on it? I feel like they make a lot of different kinds of people, crowds of people feel welcome. They're not afraid to be political, do political benefits. I don't know, I think they're a great place. I think their drinks are excellent. I love it. I also like that vegan trailer, the Arlo's place, but that closed, so that's another concern, sadness of mine. What are the queer spaces that you guys like? What makes a good queer space in the, for you in the craft brewing industry?
Yeah, I mean, Cheer Ups was definitely my answer. It's been my favorite go-to. I also really enjoy Coconut Club. It's one of the newer, I don't know, it's probably a few years old now, but Coconut Club is a blast down on 4th Street. I've had, you brought up the past, but I'll leave it there for now. Way too many good times. But I think with Cheer Ups, it just, again, ties into having a brand that goes further than just providing a space. They truly are what they say they are. They are hosting events, they're holding fundraisers, and they carry a ton of craft beer. And I've seen them do a myriad of events with craft brewers through that. And they also, Banana Hammock is one of my favorite drinks in town.
Good, yeah.
It's not a beer.
So the Iron Bear is just kind of where I started, mainly because of my partner, and so like that's where he went, that's where I go.
That's great.
That's where I really fell in love with the type of people that patron that establishment. Of course, I've been to Cheer Ups. But in terms of like craft beer related places, I love the shit out of what Brewtorium's doing. When they had the bomb scare and they said, not only are we going to do this queer beer, we're going to do 3 of them. And that was just so affirming. You walk in, you know there's going to be queer people present. What's up?
And they're going to brew a drag.
And yeah, the drag queen. I mean, like I vend at the drag brunches, so like I sell jewelry and stuff over there. So like that's just like I go there. I like Central Machine Works. That's just where I've been going. But like, what makes a queer inclusive space for me? When I can walk in and just clock some queer folks, see the rainbow flags like you talked about, know that I'm finding my identity. Like I said, like this is probably one of my most gender non-conforming outfits for me. Like just to have some big jewelry, some earrings, some painted nails. Like I know it's not necessarily a huge step maybe for other people, but for me, like this was a big moment for me to come out like this. And so to be able to dress up and to push my own boundaries, that's what makes a queer space for me, where I can go out and know, I'm gonna make myself a little uncomfortable. I'm gonna challenge my own internalized homophobia just a little bit more, so that 3 years from now, I'm that much further. And that's where I like to go.
I mean, you guys named everywhere I was gonna name. It's like I have definitely had unoiled canned Harry's. I did not have beer. They're the reason I can't have just regular orange juice mimosas anymore. I honestly would second everything. Cheer Up Charlie's. The unfortunate aspect, it's not just an Austin thing. It's a nationwide thing. There's not most designated queer bars are usually geared more towards men than women. Lesbian, women-oriented bars have kind of really been fading rapidly for decades. And also just, you get a girlfriend in a semicircle, stop going to bars, which I never did. In fact, there's been a couple of gals I'm like, I can't just sit there and drink 3 beers while you still nurse that same sangria. As and of course other breweries and stuff. I mean, if you walk into Austin Beer Works, it looks like a rainbow vomited in there on purpose. Holdout's always been a place, but also, we get the benefit of knowing places, even if you don't see the flag, like you know the people that work there, whereas for the, you know, general public, you guys might not know that walking in. I haven't been anywhere in Austin in a long time that made me feel not okay to be there.
Good.
For at least that specific reason, or at least I shouldn't say a brewery. I've been to bars in Austin where I'm like, yeah, this isn't gonna work. But the places that have been named, Brutorium obviously does great. I've had really great experiences at St. Elmo. Jester King does a really good job. A variety of the different places around town, and we do have the benefit of being in this city. You know, I don't know how it'll be if you drive an hour and a half outside of town, but I hope the best.
I do also want to shout out Deer Dry Drinkery is a really cool dry bottle shop, and they do
Where's
host.
that one?
It's on. Do you know where? It's on
Caesar
Caesar
Chavez?
Chavez. I think it's definitely woman owned.
Deer Dry? Is that
Deer,
what it's called?
D-E-A-R,
Yeah.
Dry Drinkery. I believe it's woman owned, and I do believe they do queer socials.
I
I
love it.
don't know that, but
Okay.
I know that they're
At least look them up.
in a bottle shop that hosts social events.
Okay.
Caesar
Caesar
Chavez.
Chavez, thank you, Carolyn. Do you guys have favorite queer spaces or things that you feel make a space feel welcoming and inclusive that we didn't mention? I'd love to hear. Yeah, please.
It's actually kind of a question tying back to how you ended yours, which is not talking about a favorite queer space here in Austin, but what do you recommend to breweries or businesses in general that are trying to create a queer space outside of Austin where it's not as accepted? Is there a way to be successful with that? What are your thoughts?
I definitely think so. I mean, I'm originally from southern Indiana, and you can imagine, and the thing is, it's gotten a little bit more uptight since I've left. But I can go to my hometown, and there are a couple of gay bars, and there are a couple of businesses that do display flags. I can understand in certain contexts and certain areas if you don't feel safe putting a flag out front. And I can say, like, you can be in Austin, you can put up a flag, you can still get a bomb threat. 99.999% of the time it's bullshit. Nobody's actually going to do that. But I do understand the trepidation, and you get into smaller and smaller areas, or even just some of the cities, further out West Texas or far East Texas, getting away from like the kind of corridor that we're all in between Dallas and San Antonio, Houston and stuff. I can understand how people are not maybe wanting to attract that attention. At the same time, I feel a little bit like you kind of, if you want our business, you need to stick your neck out a little. And what you'll find is usually more positive than negative. Very rarely are you going to see a business close because they say they're queer friendly, even in the most seemingly barren of places. What you could be doing though is providing an opportunity for people in those areas to know that they're not alone, and they will make a point to gravitate towards you. If that's the thing, like, we will gravitate towards it if we know it's there.
Yeah, 2 points on this, and one of them is, I think you said it extremely well. Sticking your neck out, it's scary, and it feels scary the same way that going out queer feels scary sometimes, but there is community, and again, we've talked about intersectionality, like marginalizing what a community has to offer is the best way to silence that community. So not just with queer folks, but anybody that's not your standard beer drinker can make it feel like if I don't cater to them, I'm gonna lose my business. But the opposite is true. The more you engage with other communities that aren't your standard audience, the more you're gonna see patrons come in. The other thing that's interesting, I think the Guild really capitalizes on, is that legislation, advocation, really, you can focus in on people like style. So like if you show up and you're having a good time, generally people will appreciate your liveliness, your good timiness. They're gonna be like, wow, that's a person having a good time, we're having a beer. It may not be my thing, but it's okay. And then if you just sort of make it a fact of your business that people will be present in that brewery, it sort of it stops being threatening in a really real way. And so like when we propose legislation, you get down to like, what does this industry need? And it makes sense rationally. It makes sense that there will be people here who are this way. We do need things that are similar to your own interests. So like we have a commonality, it's beer. I don't care who's there as long as I have good beer. Not diminishing how dangerous it can be. But hopefully, I don't know if I've said it right, but I think that there's something you can distill into making good beer for good folks that can be your primary message, not like, fuck you, we're gonna be queer here. Like, that aggressiveness is gonna drive people away. So build up the larger community and people of all, everything will be feeling welcome, hopefully, ideally. I don't know how.
Yeah, I was just gonna, throw out the word authentic, being authentic to yourself. If as Mel said, like, if you are wanting to invite the queer community, then do it, and do it with a purpose. The breweries that we mentioned, the reason they stand out, some of them have the flags that we're mentioning, our colors flying for us, but some of them are just those that continue to throw, like St. Elmo has drag bingo, I think either once a month or once a quarter. Again, Brutorium has drag shows, like holding fundraisers for Equality Texas, Human Rights Campaign, like that's another way of telling us like, okay, like, they are here to support us and welcome us.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you for asking. One thing I was thinking was, I feel like I have in-laws in Bandera, Texas, right? Not a queer capital to the best of my gay knowledge going out there. And one of the things I always think is interesting is that there's this core. My ex's mother is like now the chair of the Bandera Democratic Party. And I wonder wherever the small town is, I wonder what the people who are pushing for a more inclusive space there, what organizations they're a part of. Is it a political organization? Is it a bingo night? Is it a women's rugby team? You know what I mean? Like, what is the organization? So that's one thing I'd be curious about, and how do you kind of reach out to that organization, whether they're explicitly queer or not. And the other thing I always think about with queer stuff is I have this expectation that everybody is going to be legible to me. I'm going to know, like, this is a queer person and this is what they know. I should know better, but I don't after all these years. And one of the things I always think back to is there's these moments that I have where I'm talking to the straightest seeming person in the world, whatever that means, and I have all these assumptions about them because of what they look like and who their partner is and what they're dressed like and everything. And a lot of the time, because of what I teach LGBT literature, I'll find out halfway through the semester, someone will say, oh, well, that was when my mom, who left my dad for another woman and was chased out of town because she was a lesbian and I was 12, like, that was my first exposure. I'll be like, oh my God, you have had this experience, you know this. So I think wherever your small town is, even if it's not just the like queers who you're welcoming in, which of course obviously you want to, but there are other people who are looking for inclusive spaces who we might not always clock right away, So I think like making spaces welcome for all those P-flag parents and whatever is really big too. Yes, please.
Going off of what you just said, I'm sorry. One, also, I have family in Bandera.
Oh, you do?
Yes, that's amazing. If you know of any LGBTQ communities out there, I would love to connect with you after. But I worked with an organization, and Sheila, I think, we connected through that. When I was in the chapter, if anyone doesn't know Pink Food Society, it is for people in the fermenting alcohol industries. It was initially for women, and they branched out and added non-binary folks as well, which is amazing. But somebody had asked me one day, what about gay men? What about men who identify as gay? And I found myself stuck in this position, one, new to the spot, and two, new as somebody who was out, I came out late in life. How do you answer a question about something that you work for and you support when there's another sect of people who you feel like should be able to walk in that space, but by the bylaws of an organization cannot? We have a lot of great LGBTQ resources nationally and in cities like Austin locally, but especially as somebody who came out late, I don't always know how to answer questions. Somebody goes, where does my friend go if he's a brewer and he's gay and he doesn't have a resource or a place to go to? Do you guys have any places or ideas or thoughts?
Yeah, I thought about this when Ross was speaking earlier in regards to the community because, yeah, I think there's 4 of us in here that we know work in the industry and that are LGBTQ identifying, and there is seemingly not an LGBTQ support group is not the word I'm looking for, but so as Fish just said, Pink Boots is for women and non-binary in the alcoholic, for adult alcoholic fermented beverage industry. There's also the National Black Brewers Association. There's a myriad of other minority-focused groups around, but what I can say about all of them is they were started by somebody in that minority group. And I think it's going to take us to do that. And I know that a couple of y'all in here are working on that, and I'm excited about that. You know, Terry Ferendorf, she founded Pink Boots because she was a women presenting brewer and was like, there's no women in brewing. And then she went on travel and realized that there were women in brewing. She just hadn't connected. And so she created Pink Boots, I believe back in 2007. And so, yeah, I think as communities do, we have to start from within, and we're gonna have to create it.
Absolutely. And what is queer history if not a fractioned and competing group of everybody wanting their own piece? I think it goes back to what I was saying about the intersectionality. I did want to also shout out AGLIF. And I think that the reason I want to do that is because knowing queer history and discovering through art, literature, film, every component you can consume that gives you a broader perspective of where we've been helps you understand how to fight forward. And so watching documentaries, reading about the histories of our queer elders, like that is hugely important, and educating yourself constantly on what's been done before and where those fractions have occurred can help you navigate when you start to have competing identities. So like, what happens when you have an organization that wants to but can't? I think that we do often have to fight for rights individually, but knowing that fighting together cohesively is necessary. I mean, you're seeing it across the board. Collaborative, but knowing that speaking to your specific truth is the best you can do, whether that's a single identity, multiple identities, where you fit in it. But finding those advocacy groups that work with you and are active in your community, educating yourself on history and literature and art for your community, and then showing up and trying to build coalitions.
And if anybody doesn't know, I'm so glad Ross shouted out AGLIF. That's the Austin Gay and Lesbian International Film Festival. Also goes by PRISM sometimes. They were trying to change
I think they've tried to change the
I know,
like
it's
all
never gonna
genders.
work.
It's AGLIF, yeah.
It was all genders. I'm like,
That's right,
There
they
it
changed
is.
it to that too, yeah. So we have a film festival, it's great. We also have Outsider, which is an amazing queer art fest. More weird than AGLIF for sure. And then also in terms of, I'll tell you about it. And then also in terms of organizations, because I love what you're saying, get connected to advocacy orgs. If anybody doesn't know about them, you mentioned Equality Texas. That's our statewide advocacy org for LGBTQIA communities. They do amazing work on Texas state laws. And we also have TENT, the Transgender Education Network of Texas, who focuses on trans rights. Amazing work there. But there isn't apparently gay brewers, but there are a lot of other organizations that you can be a part of as well. But I want to see that either, I'm really curious to see, like, will there become an LGBTQIA Brewers Association? Sounds like you've got some little irons in the fire. Or will organizations kind of change? Will Pink Boots be like, oh, we want our gay brothers here too? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Can't predict the future. Did you want to answer that too, Mel?
I would love to. It kind of does surprise me that there isn't an LGBTQ plus.
Think of all the cute merch there could be.
It makes itself.
Slowly.
So I would be really excited to see something like that be developed.
Anybody else have questions for our audience? Our panel? Okay, my final question for y'all is a little bit basic, but I'm just curious if there are people who are recent alums, students who might want to get involved, whether with internships or jobs, like where would you direct them? How does somebody break into the craft brewing industry if they want to? Is that viable?
You want to take the mic first?
Sure. So yeah, getting into the craft beer industry, I think the first thing is finding, again, like the way I did it when I left my corporate side of my life, at least in the last 10 years. I literally went home, I researched all the breweries in town. This was back in 2015. There were a lot less, but I did that, and then I looked at the ones that spoke to me, and then I reached out to them. And so starting with that, we also have a job board that we post. We ask all of our brewers across the state to post their jobs, and I've set this out at our table, but when we use the term brewers as a craft brewers guild, we are referring to anyone that works inside a brewery. So that could be someone that is smart enough to make beer, like these two to my left, but also could be your bartender, your accountant, your graphic designer, your marketing person, your events person, social media, all of that goes into it, your merchandise designer. So anyhow, we have our job board on the guild. You know, there aren't really unpaid internships right now in the craft beer world. I think one thing that I'm excited about as the education events manager is we are looking at a mentorship program that might be within our members. We are a member-focused group, but we also have an education category membership, and St. Edward's is one of our members in that. So there's opportunities to come, and I'm excited to work with our new board that starts on February 1st.
Even a decade ago, my brother and I applied to over 40 breweries nationwide. We were applying for every position, bartender, night janitor, anything. And it just so happened that Real Ale had two packaging positions open up. I think 3 months after we started applying. So it's been hard. It continues to be hard, especially as the industry is in a bit of shrink right now, especially in Austin. Bart Watson will tell you that the industry is doing okay nationally, but here in Texas we're struggling. So these are small businesses. There's not always a lot of upward growth or positions opening up. There are still breweries opening, and I'd say just keep an eye on the job boards. Keep an eye on however people find jobs. It was hard. It is hard, but be open, and also just know that not every position is going to be a creative wonderland of brewing and skipping around breweries.
Yeah, just to add on to what Ross was saying, essentially, like, obviously you want your dream job, whatever that is in the beer industry, but you might start doing something else to get your foot in the door. Back in the day, it was always like, if you want to brew beer, you're going to start by washing kegs. I don't know that that's necessary anymore, but there are opportunities to, like, I've never brewed beer, like, where can I go? There's opportunities, so ask those questions. We've also done job fairs at the Guild, and we've rotated around a few cities. Obviously, we need our brewers to be hiring at that time, so that's something that might be coming back. And the interesting part to something you just said, Bart Watson is actually now the president of the Brewers Association, which is the Texas, he got promoted. The Brewers Association is the counterpart to the Texas state, or Texas Craft Brewers Guild. We represent your state. The Brewers Association represents our nation. And so members can be members of both organizations, or not. We prefer they be ours and theirs. But that being said, we actually reached out. We know that unfortunately we've had closures happening, but Texas is faring a little bit better than the nation. But that being said, it is the urban areas that are being hit harder with the closures, but the rural areas, the opportunity is there. And I think it might come. I am speculating here from rent in the urban areas. Right, downtown is anywhere in any city. It's going to be increasing at this moment, but those rural opportunities exist. And we have another membership category called Brew City, Texas, and those are working with your CBBs, your DMOs, your tourist organizations in cities. And we had a goal last year of partnering with, I think it was 5? Okay. We had a goal of having 5 new members in that category that we launched in March last year. We closed the year out with 33. So people and rural communities and large. Austin is our largest city that is a Brew City, Texas member, but they exist. And, we're happy to answer questions at the Guild, info@tcbg.org. If you have questions about stats and whatnot, we will do what we can to chase those answers. But we even found that interesting, learning that Texas is faring a little bit better in the closure opening rate than the national, but we are still 48 out of 50 in the per capita of breweries. So we know we're a massive state, so there's plenty of area. And I say at the end of the day, there's never going to be too many breweries as long as we're all providing quality space, quality beer, and a quality atmosphere. So.
Disregard everything I said.
I had you, my boss is right there.
And again, I'm gonna echo what they said, when I was trying to start, and it took a while. I applied for
Mel has.
repeated. I started out actually volunteering, getting my foot in the door at the Texas Craft Brewers Fest. And doing that, a couple of years in a row, and just pounding some pavement, and basically just kept showing up at the breweries I like, until finally one of them was like, we'll start paying you. And when I began there, I did not actually even know what I was wanting to do. I didn't really figure out that brewing was the route I wanted to go until I was there for a few months and applied for the first production opening. I did not get it, but I was strongly encouraged by my future boss to just keep doing it. He said it took me 4 times before they let me move into production. But also, I have benefited from the brewery job listings on the Texas Craft Brewer site when I was leaving my previous position, and was running into Caroline at Austin Beer Works saying, hey, did you know they just posted a job yesterday? No, I actually did not. So, and just so happened that one of the owners, Will Golden, walked up at that exact moment, and everybody made it really weird and awkward. Why don't you guys just go ahead and kiss? And guys are making it weird, and Will was like, thank you, and then good job. Right now, the industry, like we said, we've talked about it getting, it's in a downswing. It's not the first one. It's not going to be the last one. I'm naive enough, weirdly, because I'm never really that naive in most things, to believe it is going to bounce back. It's probably not going to be this year. Probably not going to be next year. Though I don't think it's going to stay like this forever. There are going to be places where the growth is going to be in these smaller towns, because all the focus has been. It was easy to have a brewery in a big city in 2012. Now, because of that influence though, smaller towns, like my hometown, since I left, has like 4 breweries that have opened since I moved here. Places that haven't been saturated yet, and more people in those areas where they think like, oh, they just drink.
Good evening, Hilltoppers. At this time, we'd like to welcome our musical guest. They will be playing for the next hour. Please be sure to stop by and let them know how much you appreciate them being here. Now let's all hear it for the Austin Polka Band.
So sorry, Mel, for cutting you off.
You can't have a proper beer fest without the
But it is the Polka Band. Thank you to our panelists. Give them